Hi, I'm Suzanne Bakker, and today I want to talk about what are your choices in contracting for your nonprofit. And as you can see, I'm using a presentation to talk to you about this topic because I want to be sure that I am staying on point and that I'm using your time as effectively and efficiently as possible. But before we dive into the topic of today, I just want to first tell you a little bit about who I am. Hi, I'm Suzanne, and it's my passion to help nonprofit leaders like you professionalize the operational back end of their nonprofit organizations so that you can focus more on your mission, the reason why your nonprofit organization was created, and worry a little bit less about all the other stuff. And I do that. I help you professionalize by sharing my experience working in different nonprofit organizations over the past 30 years, in different roles, in different organizations, working in different countries, in different contexts, on different topics. And what I learned through all of that is that all nonprofit organizations, whether they are big or small, whether they are based in the Netherlands or abroad, whether they are working on one topic or on the other, they face the same challenges when it comes to organization management, to finance management and admin, project design, fundraising, team management, HR and labor law. All these issues, all these are issues at the operational back end that are very similar across all nonprofit organizations that I have been working in and with, and that I'm still working with at this moment. And that is why I thought I wanted to share more widely my experiences and all the lessons that I learned by making mistakes, by seeing mistakes, but of course also by having success stories. And I want to share my experience here in this series on YouTube, but also I'm sharing my experience in weekly articles on my website. I'm sharing it in my weekly Facebook Live sessions on Facebook, in my monthly trainings in my free Facebook group, and also I do have paid workshops and courses that I offer to nonprofit organizations from across the world. So that's basically what I do. And then you might wonder, what am I focusing on? So I'm focusing on all the fun stuff, all the things that nobody really likes, like finance and admin, organization management, HR and labor law, project design, fundraising, planning. All these things are things that I love and that I love helping you set up in a way that it takes less of your energy, and so that you can feel confident that everything is sorted out well at the back end, so that you can jump in and focus on your mission. Yeah, so those are the topics that I'm going to be talking about here in my video series on YouTube and in other channels where I'm sharing my experience, and of course also in my courses and workshops that I have. So that's what we're going to be working on. And before we dive into the topic of today, I just want to say that we are here together at my home office, my dinner table actually. And I just want to make it feel as if we are here really sitting together, talking to each other about an issue that maybe you're facing, a question that you might have, a topic that you find challenging, or where you're not really sure which direction to take. So I want us to be feeling as if we're talking together as colleagues and finding together the best way out for you, so that you can then worry less about all that stuff and move on and work on your mission, on the reason why your nonprofit was created and why it's working in this world to make things better tomorrow than they are today. Yeah, so please feel that we are together here in this at my dinner table, where you are always welcome to contact me with questions in my free Facebook group. You can find the link in the description of this video, below the video, but also feel free to reach out to me on Messenger or email, whatever is convenient to you. Just feel that we are here together as colleagues, and I'm here to help you find the best way that works for you in your situation, in your specific context, considering all the things that you need to consider to come to the best possible solution in that situation. So that's what I want to highlight here before we dive into the topic of today. So let's get going. So what are your choices in contracting for your nonprofit in case you want to engage somebody in the work of your organization? And the key goal or the key question here is to find the right way of contracting for your organization in terms of legal compliance, but also in terms of the needs and constraints of your nonprofit organization, and of course the desires and the needs of the person concerned, the person that you want to engage in the work that you do. And so we're going to be looking at that in this presentation. We're going to be looking at the choices that you have, the differences between those different options, and then the consequences of your choices. And then if you want to continue working on this topic in your nonprofit, I'm going to suggest you some things that you might like to explore, might like to work on, your to-dos at the end of this presentation. And so let's first look at the choices. So there are 4 main categories of engagement with somebody that's doing work in your nonprofit. 4 types of persons or roles that you can contract in your organization. And I use the word contract, and that's very important for me to highlight that I think, based on my experience, that you need to draw up a contract with each of those 4 categories. And I do know that sometimes people feel that for interns or volunteers, that's maybe not so important to enter into a real contract, to write everything down, especially if you're not paying them anything or not much. But I really have a different opinion, different experience. And from my point of view, it is super important to enter into a real contract with each of those 4 categories, because a contract actually is a written confirmation of the expectations that you have of that person. What do you expect them to do? What do you want them to bring to your organization in terms of the work that they're going to contribute to? And also a written confirmation of what they can expect from you in return for delivering that work or that service or doing that thing in your organization. And it is really super important to be clear on the expectations, both your expectations and their expectations, and to have that in writing in all cases. Doesn't matter whether you are paying them anything or maybe just a little bit or a lot. Doesn't matter whether you're just doing it for 3 days training or for a 1-year project. Doesn't matter if it is a full-time or part-time. In any case where you are expecting somebody to do work for you and where you are going to give them something in return, whatever that is, it is very important to put that in writing in a contract. Yeah, so there are 4 types of contracts that you can enter into with those people. First of all, you can, of course, contract somebody as an intern. You can contract somebody as a volunteer. You can contract somebody as an independent contractor. Sometimes that's also referred to as a freelancer. Or you can contract somebody as an employee. You can become their employer in that case. And for any of these contracts, it's important to know that each of them can be filled out very flexibly. Yeah, so if you need somebody for a year, if you need somebody for 1 day a week, 2 days a week, 4 days a week, 5 days a week, everything is possible for each of those types of contracts, even though, of course, it's usual that an intern would stay maybe 3 to 6 months and the others can stay a bit longer. It's also usual that an independent contractor is not working for you full time, because that's usually much too expensive and impractical as well. But in principle, everything is possible. And the only thing that is different is that in the case of an employee, you also have the possibility to offer them an indefinite contract, a contract that has no end date. Yeah, so you can choose whether you want to employ somebody as your employee for the duration of a project, for example, or you can say that you have a start date but no end date. And that's something that usually doesn't happen in any of the other three scenarios. But in all other aspects, all those contracts can be very flexible, even though some things are more usual for an intern than for example, for a contractor. Or for a volunteer, it's usually not the case that a volunteer is working for you 5 days a week. Usually they are there for a year or a bit more, and then for 1 or 2 days a week, or maybe even less, depending on their availability and their own desires. Yeah, so these are the 4 main categories, and probably you have experience with most of them already in your organization. And you have maybe also ideas about what you can expect from each of those types of people when they are contracted by you. So as soon as you have an idea of what kind of person you would like to engage to do work in your organization, how much time would be required per week for what kind of period of duration you require, and then you can start thinking about what type of contract would suit you, and start thinking about how you can find the right person for that type of contracting. Of course, it's then also good to be aware of the differences between those 4 scenarios, those 4 options that you have, and of course the differences in terms of expectations that you can have or that they might have from you. So the first that I want to highlight here is the task readiness. And so you can easily imagine probably that an intern or a volunteer might be much less task ready than a professional contractor or an employee that you are employing based on the fact that they have relevant work experience in the field. Yeah, so you can expect that when you are contracting an intern, you might need to provide close guidance and a lot of instruction, and maybe very regular monitoring and feedback calls and so on and so forth. Whereas if you are hiring an independent contractor, then you can probably give them a terms of reference, the general thing that you want them to achieve or to get done, and then they can probably get on with it without a lot of guidance from your side. Yeah, because they have the skills and the knowledge and they know what to do, and that's exactly why you're hiring them. Yeah, so that's good to keep in mind, because that's also in a way directly or indirectly related to the pay. Then usually we choose, when we're going to think about contracting in our nonprofit, then we make the choice very often based on the amount of money that we have for those tasks, maybe project money that we have, or maybe general organizational money that we have to pay people for work to be done. And then very usually, of course, we try to be very careful with the money, so we try to pay as little as we can while trying to get the best person we can. Probably you recognize that picture. I've seen that in many nonprofit organizations. And so very often, especially if you're just starting out as a nonprofit, you will need to find people who will work with you for no pay or a very low level of payment, and then you almost automatically end up with looking for interns who can stay maybe 3 to 6 months, or maybe looking for volunteers who can stay a bit longer but who can spend less time per week because they might have a paid job in addition to their volunteering, or they might be also involved in household tasks or things like that. Yeah, so in the beginning you would usually go for people that require no pay or low pay, and those could at the same time be people that require much more guidance and instruction, and in that sense they are not really free of charge, and they will still be a cost in a way indirectly in terms of the effort of the team or the attention of the other team members, maybe you yourself, in order to make it possible for them to actually do the tasks that you want them to do. And then if we're looking at the next stage of nonprofits, very often we would go for hiring an independent contractor, somebody that we are paying per hour that they work for us or per thing that they produce for us, so that we are very clear on what we think that we need to pay them, and also so that we can see a direct relation between output, maybe for the project, and pay, and so that we can also very easily manage that if the project is ended and we don't need output anymore, then we end the contract with the contractor and we don't need to pay them anymore. Yeah, so that's very flexible in a way. Usually independent contractors are also able to work a bit more 1 week or 1 month and a little bit less in the other week or month. Also, of course, if they are on leave or if they're ill, then they're not producing anything for you, they're not working for you, so you're not paying them. Of course, the downside is that they're also not creating any output for you, but if you can plan ahead for that, then that isn't usually a problem. Yeah, so while you probably need to pay an independent contractor a little bit higher amount per hour than you would pay for an employee, even if you include the taxes in the calculation, then this is a more flexible system usually that makes it a little bit easier in the starter phase of your nonprofit to afford to hire a real expert to get things done in your projects. And then the other alternative, of course, is the regular pay, the pay that you do to an employee who is getting their weekly or monthly wages or salaries, where you are paying a fixed amount per week or per month, where you also need to reserve and pay money for taxes, social insurance, maybe severance pay or other post-service benefit pay, etc., etc. And you can predict those costs very easily because they are the same every week or every month, depending on the payment cycle that you have. And you will pay this amount even if the person that you are employing is on annual leave. Yeah, so maybe they are not working 2 weeks of the month, but you're still paying them their monthly wage, despite the fact that they are not producing anything for you during that time. Yeah, but on the whole, they are usually a little bit cheaper than an independent contractor, but a little bit less flexible. And there are some other aspects of employment that we're going to be looking at in a moment. And so on the scale of pay, no pay, low pay is usually correlating to a little bit lower task readiness, and higher pay is usually correlating to higher task readiness. There's also some other aspects that we can look at to spot differences in the 4 scenarios. So one of them is also, for example, to what extent does the person have or expect to get access to the facilities of the organization? So can an intern expect that you're going to give them a phone from the organization, a laptop from the organization, any benefits from the organization? Yes or no? Probably no, but maybe yes. It depends on your arrangements, of course. Yeah, but there is a more strong expectation from the side of your employee, of course, that they will get all these facilities, whereas probably the intern will expect that you might make available a computer at your office for them to work on, but mostly they will have their own equipment that they're using also for their classes, and they are happy to keep on using that. And then you just need to make sure that you have all your safety, security protocols in place to make sure that they're not having sensitive data on their personal laptop or phone that could maybe put your beneficiary groups in danger. At the same time, with an independent contractor, you would expect that they have their own materials, that they're taking care of their own insurance, for example, that they're taking care of taxes and all sorts of things, and that you don't need to provide a lot of access to facilities for them, other than, of course, making available files that they need, people that they need, maybe a desk that they might need if they're working from your office, etc., etc. And then the final area of differences is related to the responsibility of the organization. So I already mentioned that in case you're employing somebody, you as employer are responsible for making sure that taxes are paid, making sure that social insurance is taken care of, that post-service benefits are saved up and paid out. In the end, you are responsible for your employees taking their leave due, etc., etc. Maybe you're offering some extra benefits like health insurance, things like that. You also have responsibility for the safety of those people. So if they go somewhere, you need to provide them with instructions and gear if that's needed, etc. You might also think about, can they represent your organization in terms of, can they sign a contract or some other official document on behalf of the organization or not? And if you're looking at, for example, interns and volunteers, then the responsibility of the organization, of course, is not for taxes. You're probably not going to allow them to represent you. You might not even send them to a dangerous location on your behalf, so there might not be the same safety concerns, but you might be more responsible for learning and development. Of course, you're also responsible for learning and development of your own employees, but when it comes to interns, for example, that's usually part of the internship agreement. There's usually a section there that focuses explicitly on the learning goals that they have, which the organization is expected to help fulfill. Of course, you cannot force somebody to learn something, but you must make it possible for them to learn something. You must facilitate that and assist them where possible, and that is explicitly the responsibility of the organization and the representative of the organization that is referred to in that internship contract. And the same is also very often true of volunteers. There's also very usually a clause in a contract with a volunteer about their personal development or about something else that they would like to gain from their volunteering in your organization, and that's then also the responsibility of the organization to make sure that the volunteer or the intern is getting that. Yeah, so that's a little bit different from your regular learning offer to your employees, where there's of course also a direct interest from the side of the organization to have employees who are up to date on current developments and who are professional in the skills and knowledge that they need for the job. But when it comes to interns and volunteers, the responsibility for facilitating and fostering and making possible learning and development is a little bit stronger and more specific, usually inside the contract document already. So we've spoken a bit about compliance. I'm not going to go into details for that because I have a checklist contracting. You can find the link in the description below this video, and then you can access videos and a checklist with 8 questions that can help you look at the difference between contracting an employee or contracting an independent contractor or freelancer. And as I said, in the starter stage of your nonprofit, many nonprofits start out by contracting interns, volunteers, and later on independent contractors or freelancers instead of employees. And so it's a relevant choice because it is connected to responsibilities and also to cost levels. Yeah, so as an employer, you have certain responsibilities towards your employees. You have to have certain systems in place. You need to take care of all the tax payments and the correct salary calculation calculations and the deductions and things like that. You have to have a system for managing leave, and you need to take care of certain safety measures and so on and so forth. So that's a whole you could say circus that you need to set up as soon as you become an employer. Yeah, so for some organizations this simply isn't feasible in the starter stage because you need certain knowledge, certain skills, and you need time to put systems in place and manage them properly. So that might not be feasible in the beginning. Yeah, so because of those responsibilities, you might say, okay, I cannot afford to become an employer at the moment. Also because if you make a mistake and if there would be a dispute about that, a conflict about that, if the courts would become involved in that, then you will find that employees have a very high level of protection from the law, even if maybe in your country you think, well, employees are not so super well protected, but they are generally more protected and they have more rights towards their employer compared to independent contractors. Yeah, so that's why for nonprofits it can sometimes be easier and more comfortable to contract people as independent contractors. And that's because sometimes the costs are higher per hour, but in general it's more flexible. You can more easily terminate the agreement. It can be more flexible in the sense of I need you 2 hours this week and then 5 days the next week. I need you only 10 days in the next 2 months. Those are things where it's very difficult to contract an employee, because the employee is going to expect a certain stable level of payment from you and facilities and benefits and so on and so forth, and you might not be able to offer that or to manage that. Yeah, so that's why sometimes you might want to hire independent contractors instead of becoming an employer and having employees. At the same time, of course, the legal systems everywhere in this world are also trying to protect workers from being exploited like that, with having uncertainty in terms of contracting, uncertainty in terms of am I going to be needed this week or not? Am I going to get paid or not? Because if you're not needed as a freelancer, then you're not working, then you're not paid. And so legal systems across the world are trying also to protect people from certain kinds of exploitation in that way. And that's why there are standards for deciding whether somebody can be an independent contractor or whether somebody must be seen and treated as an employee. And those criteria are highlighted in the contracting checklist, and they have to do with whether it's an individual or a company that works for you, whether there is regular or irregular pay, and whether there is subordination or not of the party that you're contracting come towards you or not. Yeah, so those are the things that we're looking into in the checklist. I'm not going to highlight them now, but I just wanted to make clear that you might make a choice and you might consider that for you in this moment the best choice is to hire or contract an independent contractor because of your needs and constraints. And then you still need to monitor very closely the reality on the ground or in the office, probably in the work, in the field, to make sure that this situation, the work situation of that person, still complies with the legal criteria that are used to distinguish between employees and contractors. Because even if you call your contract a contract between your organization and freelancer ABC, if the situation in the office, in the work, looks like the situation of an employee, then most courts in most legal systems across the world that I've come across will consider that the reality is more important than the words on the paper, and that a person can be legally an employee even if you have signed that they are a freelancer, and even if they have signed that they are a freelancer, and sometimes even if they would prefer to be an independent contractor. Yeah, so that's important to keep in mind. This can be a very tricky part of contracting, and that's why I have a contracting checklist for you that you can consult to see and make sure that you are at all times compliant with the main principles that might apply to this distinction. Okay, but let's get back to the choices that we had. We had the choice of internship, volunteering, independent contracting, or having an employee, which is probably the final stage where you might be aiming for. We have looked at the differences in terms of organization responsibility, access to organization facilities, task readiness, and cost or pay involved. We have looked very briefly at legal consequences, legal compliance, and now I want to look at consequences. Yeah, because you can say, okay, I'm going to be very cheap in the beginning phase of my organization. I'm going to look for interns and for volunteers. And then you need to really be aware that you get what you agree on and what you pay for. So if you are not able to pay a volunteer anything, or if you're not able to pay anything and therefore you are contracting volunteers or interns, then that has also consequences for what you can expect from those people in terms of independent working and initiative taking. It also might have consequences on the quality of the work that you can expect, and also the experience that they bring to the work that you might expect. But also it could be that there are consequences for the team dynamics. To what extent are people feeling that they're part of the team, part of the organization, that they feel that the organization's interests are their interests and that they're really into it. That's usually more the case with an employee than with an independent contractor. And sometimes volunteers can also feel very strongly that they're part of the team and the organization and the mission, and that could be very important to them. But for interns, it could be that this organization, this internship is useful for them, for their personal development, maybe for their professional development, but not so much in terms of being a live mission for them. Yeah, so you really need to consider, okay, if I'm looking for this kind of person, maybe because of my financial constraints, then I also need to be aware that I cannot expect certain things from those people, or that I might not get certain things from those people, or they might not be able to contribute certain things to the team, to the organization, to the project, and to the tasks. And so you need to think about the consequences, and probably you can think of some other consequences too, some differences between how an intern, how a volunteer, how an independent contractor, or how an employee would feel and behave in the project, in the team, and in the organization. Yeah, so when you finally need to choose what kind of contracting you would like to enter into, you need to consider, of course, legal compliance. You need to consider your own moral obligations, that you might not want to be an exploitative non-profit organization, especially if you have values that are contradicting that way of contracting, but also you might consider how it will impact the team or the team cohesion if you make a certain choice or another. And of course, you need to talk to the person involved and make sure that they know what is best for them, and that that you might also be able to provide that for them. Yeah, so if you would like to continue thinking about contracting and how to do that in your organization, then I would suggest you the following to-dos. First of all, define your needs and constraints. So what are your needs in terms of work to be done, and what are your constraints in terms of things that you might offer? Are you able to offer everyday guidance to an intern? Are you able to offer money? Are you able to offer benefits? Are you able to offer people to go on a course? Whatever are you able to offer, and what are you not able to offer? And what are the needs that you need to be fulfilled by the person that you're going to contract? And then what could be in that situation, bringing together the needs and the constraints, the best solution in terms of contracting? And is that realistic considering the constraints that you have? And maybe the best solution would be for you to have an employee, but that might not be realistic. If you look at the money that you have available, it might not be stable enough for that. It might also not be realistic in terms of the organizational setup that you have. You might not be able to manage the responsibilities of an employer, for example. And then make sure that you discuss this in the team. What are the consequences and of different choices, and what could be possible solutions? Yeah, how could certain constraints be alleviated or mitigated with help of the team, or maybe with help of a creative idea that one of your team members might have? And then once you're clear on your specific situation in this moment for contracting, then I would suggest that you create standard contract formats for each scenario, so that you will have a standard contract for interns, a standard contract for volunteers, a standard contract for independent contractors, and a standard contract for employees, so that you're ready to meet any situation when you get there, as soon as you get there. That would be my suggestion for you to get started on contracting choices in your nonprofit organization. And the final thing I want to say to you is I am here for you. So if you have any questions about this video or about any other issue to do with management or operations of your nonprofit, then please be warmly invited to join my Facebook group and ask me anything there. You can find the link here on the screen and also below in the description of this video. And I have to say, I'm really looking forward to seeing you there and to continuing the conversation there. And of course, I'm looking forward to seeing you in my next video, when we're going to be talking about another HR management, finance management, organization management topic for nonprofits. See you there. Bye for now.